So now, going past some incredible artwork, we move on to the game round. And of course you can see there were more diagrams in some of the previous parts of the first edition, but again a lot of fluff as well. So the key concept of the game remains the same, but it's been tidied up, and it's reduced the number of stages from 4 down to 3 in reality. So you can see here, the new edition, you've got initiative, activation, and housekeeping. Previously, you had initiative, compulsory action, new actions, and housekeeping. And that's just a slight tweak in the wording. No longer is there the rather confusingly named compulsory actions phase and new actions phase. Instead, now you've got initiative, activation, which is split to 2 parts, compulsory activations and new activations, and then housekeeping. It's all very clear and to the point. All the fluff's been taken out, which is really good. The steps of the housekeeping phase, one thing I did like, are now numbered. And previously in the book, it wasn't too bad, but it really makes it clear exactly what you do in which order. Again, so number 1, check for victory conditions. Number 2, collect all tokens. You must leave status markers in play for broken and weary groups. Because I always used to get confused at what point do you take the weary token away and then test morale if you need to reduce your dice score, or don't need to worry about that anymore. It's all set out here. So you collect up all the tokens, but you leave weary and broken. You adjust morale penalties for which groups are not weary. Anyone who's weary needs to take a morale check to reduce their morale penalty. Then you remove the weary tokens. And then you just go around and make sure all the groups are at least an inch away from each other, which is fine. And again, they summarise it here. So it's really good to see that the whole process has been streamlined quite a bit. The shout out box here, I like how they're using these to sort of like highlight key things. So if you're flipping through the book and you're looking for it, you can see, here's the bit on adjusting morale penalties. This is what I need to read. Perfect, done. When we move on to activations, again, that's clearly set out now with its own subheading and new page, whereas previously it was just kind of continuing on. I should probably say that the new edition has got everything in one column, whereas the other previous edition had 2 separate columns. And I think it just flows better in one column this way. So, it's all on the page where you can see it. This gives you a summary of the actions that you can take and what tokens you need to use. We follow the same as well then for reactions, and we get to see one of the new things here, which is reaction shooting. So we'll cover that in a bit more later, but reaction shooting is a new thing in the game. There's a subtle change in that all commanders can now use their command actions to give a reaction. Previously it had to be your retinue leader, whereas now, even if it's not your retinue leader, if you've got a second in command, they can use their command tokens to issue reaction orders, which is really useful because it means you can have them essentially trying to cover a flank or something if you need to, and issue out an order to a group who's already activated. So yeah, it's really positive in that way. The order of actions and reactions is clarified. What happens and when, in what order are actions and reactions made. Just a little bit of extra clarity, which is always good. The way compulsory actions work has changed, and for anyone who's familiar with the game, you might see that there's no mention of shocked anymore. That's because it's been taken out of the game, which I think is brilliant. I could see where they were going with the idea for having shocked, but it never worked really in my mind. So how many actions each group can take is really been explained. And admittedly, I think I might have been playing this wrong the entire time, because in the first edition, group commanders they don't become weary when using multiple command actions, and this is the wording from the book. They're too heroic to get tired from just giving orders, but they may still get weary from run actions or performing 2 or more actions themselves. Right, so note that bit: 2 or more actions. We used to play, and we would have our commanders taking 3 actions. Obviously, they'd get weary, but they'd only get weary once, and so you could sort of giving out an order. Well, no, sorry, not give out an order. You move, charge, or something along those lines, because we didn't look at it close enough. Now they've clarified and said no group can take more than 2 actions or reactions during a single round, whether it's actions, command actions, or bonus actions. Great, done. It's clear as day. There is an ability, I think, which allows you to take another action, potentially. I can't remember exactly. But obviously, we were clearly messing that up. We let commanders sometimes take all 3 actions themselves, which is good. So, at this point, actually, of the first edition, they then start getting into psychology, talking about broken and shocked, which felt a bit out of place. And this is the sort of thing which happens normally as a result of a combat action. So really, that should be dealt with after the combat action. And that's exactly what they've done in this book. They've kept bits and pieces in order. So now we move on to movement and how that works. As you can see, so yeah, first edition, they go into broken, shocked, they go into rally, they go into weary, they go into using more than one action. There you go. From performing 2 or more actions themselves. So we read that and assumed you could do 3 actions. Now you just jump straight into movement. And they talk through really about the different ways that you can move during the game. So move or run are obvious. Or combat actions can allow you to move. So if you're charging into combat, that technically is allowing you to move across the table. And so is ranged, where you're using something like Everybody Sunday, or if you move and then shoot. So it's all nice and clearly laid out that these technically count as ways you can move around the board. I mentioned again, coherency has changed slightly. They talk about it a bit more down here. You can now be partly outside, as this guy in the bottom right hand side is. He's partly outside of the coherency bubble, so he's fine for being that. The penalties for being out of coherency are clearly explained. So again, nice and clear. Previously, if you were set up like this previously, you would have been out of coherency. I guess it just gives people a little bit more leeway to actually get on with playing the game rather than measuring each individual inch. There's lots of information here around how movement is affected by different parts of the game. So by whether it's by terrain, whether it's by line of sight, and they're clearly laid out. And they use tables a lot, and I appreciate a good table. I think it's a good way to display information like this, and it makes sense. So yeah, it's great. There's fewer diagrams, so previously we would have had diagrams like this, but I don't think it's needed really, because the core part of the game is not dissimilar from other games really. So the next part covers combat actions, and the first edition, you can see here, they had lots and lots of information here around terrain and movement, obstacles, buildings. That now is all in its own separate section on terrain. Brilliant. They've got a section here on defense actions, where really we should be talking about combat actions before we talk about defense actions. But I suppose they're talking there about how you would group everyone together, which is fine. So the combat bit is, let's be honest, this is the fun bit, unless obviously you are shit at rolling dice, in which case it's probably the bit you dread. Now they talk about how there's 2 different types of combat. There's ranged and there's melee. Easy peasy. They've taken the flowchart out, this flowchart here, which I do think is a slight change, because I found this flowchart was one of the good parts of the rulebook that I was actually able to follow quite simply. So I mean, I can understand why they've done it. It's because they've set it out a bit more clearly. But I like the flowchart. I'll be sad to see that go. What we're getting here now as well is some of the addition that the first edition had in other parts of the book. So it feels like this is actually where it belongs. So they explain the sort of like the process of the combat process. So shoot, charge, resolve, resolution. And that's essentially the same as the first edition, just it's been simplified, it's been boiled down a bit more. So they explain more around how dice work and what an attack pool is. That's covered down here. I quite like this bit because it's started to clarify some of the changes they've made to commanders. Modifying dice pools versus modifying dice rolls is called out. I presume this is to avoid any confusion around which modifier or what modifiers are capable of doing, whether they're capable of modifying your dice pool and modifying every single dice in that pool, or whether it's an individual dice. So, fair enough. So, as I alluded to earlier, there's been a big change because shocked has been removed from the game. I mentioned I can see where they were going with the idea of being shocked, but in game it never really worked. It always really felt that being broken was worse than being shocked, because if you were broken you were running away from the fight, whereas if you were shocked you were standing where you were. And if you then managed to rally, you were still in position, which is actually pretty good. I also could never remember the difference between the two. I mean, I had to make a table in the last edition, and it's in one of my how to play videos. I made a table to try and work out exactly what the differences were between being shocked and being broken, and even then I still couldn't remember it. So it's good that they've clarified it here. Like, this is, if you're attacking a broken group, that's what you're doing. You're not having to worry about whether they're broken or shocked or everything else like that. So they go into the ranged combat, so shooting action. This very clearly sets out what it all is. There's a table here for things that would impact the line of sight. Again, like I said, love the use of tables. It really makes things clear. And you can see, oh well, line of sight, well, I can see everything, so bang. You can see exactly what you need to, and you don't need to worry about all this scrolling back and forth to try and work out bits and pieces. They've got a section here about talking about potential casualties. So if you can't see someone and you're shooting at them, they can't be removed as a casualty, which makes sense. Really, really quite sensible. Hindering is explained. Let's see where that bit is. Hindering, here we go. So hindering is changed, which is good, because previously it was always a bit kind of like, it felt a bit fluffy. So rather than taking a dice from your dice pool, from your attack pool, you now apply a -1 to all dice rolls. So you still get all the dice you've got, it's just they're all rolling at a -1. Not sure, I think losing a dice from your dice pool isn't such a bad thing when you've got a full strength group, but when you're getting down to potentially maybe 2 or 4 or fewer models left in your group, losing a dice really does make a massive difference. And I think they've done something similar in Star Wars Legion, whereas you previously, when you were shooting, cover would essentially just negate a hit if it was light cover. And so if you had 2 or 3 people in your squad and you were trying to shoot, there was almost no point trying to shoot at someone behind cover, because you'd automatically lose one of your attacks. So I think this brings it down a level, so that yes, you're all going to take a -1, but you've all still got a chance of hitting. So that's pretty good. They got a section around shooting long range and short range, which is really good. Interestingly now as well, and I think previous edition might have just been measuring range from the closest warrior from the attacking group to the closest warrior of the defending group. So bit of a change here, because now you're actually measuring the range for each individual model. Could be a bit more admin during the game, but at least it's going to force you to position your troops a little bit better. So if you've got someone who is 9 inches away, they'll be within short range. If you've got someone who's also targeting the same group but they're 11 inches away, then they'll be long range. So really it's just a bit of clarification and a little bit of extra measuring, but it makes sense. But now it does mean you're going to be generating 2 attack pools. So really just buy some different coloured dice and roll them all at once, and you'll know exactly what you're looking for. And actually, another change that I quite like is when they're talking about adding additional dice to an attack pool. If it's say using the Inspire rule, you now get to pick. You can pick which dice pool that goes in. So obviously, if you've got a group of 6 bowmen who are shooting at a target, and you've got 1 who's in short range and 5 who are at long range, and you've got an extra dice from Inspire, of course you're going to lump that extra dice in with the short range guy, because why would you not? Obviously you want to take advantage of that bonus you're getting from being closer. So I like that, and that applies for everything, it's not just shooting. They've got a section here around checking morale. That's essentially the same as the last game. In game, I always seem to forget about this one, where if you want to target a group which is not the closest group to you, you have to take a morale check. I guess that's mainly just because why would you be shooting at the guys who are 200 paces away when there's a group of guys who are 50 paces away? Reality is you try to shoot at those guys who are closer, so makes sense really. There's bits around here, so as you can see, defender reactions, attack pools, which we've already talked about, and different dice getting added to different pools, that sort of thing. The melee combat section, again, clear step by step what you have to do. You declare your target, you check your line of sight, you measure your range. There are slight differences from that point when it comes to melee combat. There's been a change to, so you can see line of sight here, they explain it all for you, measuring the range, it's all explained. The melee modifiers have changed slightly. I quite like this because it gives a little bit more, it's a bit more flavour to the game. So this is the old table. So if you've got the same melee morale score, so the same morale penalties, there's no difference. Previously though, if you had one morale penalty and your opponent had 0, and you wanted to attack them, you'd lose a dice. Same other way around. If they wanted to attack you, they'd get an attack dice. Whereas now it's slightly more subtle. So if there's a difference of 1, it essentially gives you a re-roll. So the defender may re-roll an additional defense dice, or attacker may re-roll additional attack dice. Then you've got the attacker gains 1 dice, the attacker gains 2 dice. I suppose that is simulating the fact that if you're attacking a group who have already taken casualties, they're less likely to be up for the fight than not. And then if the attacker's got more penalties, the defender gains +1 defense dice. So these are actually better for the defender because they're probably more likely to hide under their shields, I suppose. So that's what it's trying to represent. So I like the changes to it. It might take a little bit of getting used to try and remember bits and pieces, but I do like it. They talk about defender reactions, which we've already covered really. Strength of the charge. Now, I like this change. Previously, and you can see it here at part 5D, it was always a bit confusing because you only had to roll for the strength of the charge, and this is my interpretation of the rules. You only had to roll for strength of the charge when you were more than your maximum movement distance away. So say you were knights in mail and you were moving 4 inches, you only had to roll to see for the extra distance if you were charging 5, 6 or more inches. So if you were charging within your sort of like movement range, say 3 inches away, there was no chance of you getting a bonus. Whereas now that's changed. You have to roll for strength of charge regardless of how far you're trying to move. And I like this because it adds a little bit of risk rewarding. If you get a 6, you get an extra attack dice. So that's brilliant. If you get a 1, you lose an attack dice. So there's a chance that you could think that you're going to run straight into the opponent and smash them to pieces. You roll a 1 on the strength of the charge dice, you're going to be losing the attack dice. So it's a little bit risk reward, and I quite like this actually. They now move on to reaction shooting, which is a brand new part of the game, which I'm really quite keen to see how this works. Essentially, if you're being attacked by a group who are at least their basic movement away, so if you're unarmoured spearmen and they're at least 6 inches away, and they're trying to attack a group of bowmen, the bowmen can take reaction shooting. So essentially, they get to shoot at the spearmen before the spearmen get into combat. And this is resolved before they charge into you. So all defending warriors who've got line of sight contribute attack dice. All enemies are within range. The difference being it's considered to be rolled at long range rather than at short range, which is fine. I mean, it's a reaction. They're not taking an aimed shot. They're just panicking and shooting back. The attacking group, if they take casualties, those are removed, and then you move into combat. So it has the potential to be quite devastating if you're trying to attack a large group of ranged weapons. So for example, a mass group of bowmen, trying to charge straight at them, that if they've got a reaction left, so this is the key thing, if they've got an action left to take a reaction or a commander near them to give it to them, if you charge at them, they've got a chance to destroy you before you even get close. So really quite a nice tweak to the game. Failed charges. Is there a section on failed charges? Yeah, there's a section on failed charges explaining how these work. These are always fun in game. I mean, there's nothing more depressing than seeing your line of knights line up ready to charge across the battlefield, only you roll poorly on the dice roll and then they don't go anywhere. They get stuck in the middle of the field and they get slaughtered. So, it's always a bit of fun. There's a section here around generating attack ball dice, and they clarify commanders now, which is good. And it's also quite simple. So if your commander is in the front line, as you've got here in this example here, the commander here is in blue. If he's in base-to-base contact with another warrior, he adds his dice to the attack pool using his stats. So if you've got a veteran baron in the group and you've got, say, irregular knights, you'll be rolling much easier for your commander to hit. So he'll be in direct combat here. If he's got an additional action that he's not used as well, he can spend that to add a dice to his dice pool. So you'll need to separate your attacks out for that, and as I've illustrated here, you can use it using different colours. The flip side to this, though, is if you're being charged or if your opponent decides to attack back and they're in base contact with your commander, they can target him directly. So you need to separate those attacks, the attacks being made against the commander, because there is a chance to kill him in combat directly. And of course, that could be game over. And as I mentioned, any additional dice that you get, you can allocate them to whatever pool you want. So you can use, if the attacking group is being inspired by their commander and they're attacking an enemy commander, they can choose to pop that extra dice into the pool which is attacking the commander, which is quite nasty for a commander. On the flip side, if the commander is not in the front rank, then he still adds a dice to the combat, or two if he's spending an action, but it's at the sort of stat line of the other guys who are fighting. He doesn't contribute his stat line to it, so again, risk reward. Do you want to put your commander into combat because he's more likely to win, or do you want to keep him back a bit because if you lose him, you lose the game? So that's quite a useful thing. There's a section around command range because that has changed slightly. Command range is now measured from the model that confers the benefit. So if you're talking about the commander directly without any upgrades, it would be directly from him. If there's a banner or a priest or a musician, you measure that from that individual model. So if you were looking to see the range of a priest, you'd be measuring it from the priest, not from the commander. There's a section on slow weapons. So these are things like two-handed weapons and I think crossbows as well. I think they might be slow, which is useful. It's an evolution, really, of the two-handed weapon rules. Basically, they still attack second if there's an attack back, but the bonus they get is a +2 on the dice roll, so they are quite good. So it's nice to see that it's called out and it's laid out in a logical place. So now you move on to the section about resolving attacks, and we're going to go through down here. Where's resolving attacks? Roll into here. It's this sort of section here. So the process for melee and ranged combat converges again back here. So for attack rolls, your dice are rolled together, and the target is whatever was in the stat in your profile. So if you were a veteran, your target is X. If you're a green troop, your target is Y. That's standard across whatever sort of troop you're getting. What's different then is the modifiers that can be applied, and there'll be things like weapons, abilities or traits, other rules such as hindering or higher ground, or being weary. And so they clearly set out what exactly is the situation in which each dice is modified. Same applies for defense rolls. So for every successful attack, the defender gets a chance to defend. That applies regardless of whether they've got armor or not. So this is the chance that basically the attacker, although they might be successful, they might not cause a wound which is sufficient enough to kill. It's worth calling out, and they do call it out here, that if there are multiple attack pools, then there may also be multiple defense pools. So you've got to make sure that you actually deal with these in the correct order so that you don't remove people, or you might add the wrong dice to the wrong pool. So it's just reminding you to be careful. And in a similar way to attack rolls, you aim for the stat that's on your profile, and then that can be modified either by weapons, by armor, abilities, defense reactions, being weary, or being out of coherency. So there's much more things that can impact your defense stat than your attack stat. As in the previous edition, a 1 cannot be rolled as a shield save. So if you get a 1 on your defense roll, that's it, dead. Shield rolls remain unchanged. It's a 7, 8, or 9 up, depending on the size of your shield. You can get some benefits from having a shield. I think having a sword and shield gives you a bonus that we'll see when we get to the weapons section. So it's nice to see that some bits and pieces there have changed. When removing casualties, again, it reminds you, just make sure that you're dealing with each defense or each attack pool in order, so that you're removing the right people at the right time. There's a section on range shooting back. The change here is that you can shoot back now at long and short range, whereas previously it had to be at short range. So that's a good change, and you can shoot back if someone's shooting pointy sticks at you. And also, again, you can attack back, but attack back is pretty much the same as it always has been. Combat resolution, much clearer. Previously, combat resolution started at the bottom here, at the bottom of a page with a sentence. Now it's got its own section, it's got its own headings, it's got subheadings, they're all numbered. I like it a lot. You apply morale penalties, so that's the very first thing you do. Then you work out who's won. If you're then forced back, you then make the force back move. This has changed, and I like the change again, mainly because now you move back 1 inch for every casualty that's caused, rather than 1 inch plus another inch for every casualty. So I played a game a couple of weeks ago against a friend, and he had some sergeants who he'd given mail to, and they were moving 4 inches, and they'd move forward 4 inches. I'd shoot at them, I'd kill 2, they'd move back 3 inches, then they'd move forward again 4 inches. So there was always like going 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Now it's just much clearer. There's a table telling you what to do if you're forced back into certain areas. So forced back into an enemy group, forced back into an obstacle. It's all clearly laid out, and I like this because I used to struggle with some of these bits. It's much simpler now. Regroup is unchanged. I like this thing. It's a sort of like you can sneakily run out, hit someone, then run back. It's a nice element of the game. You are less likely to get stuck in no man's land if you win, because you can then move somewhere which is probably more advantageous. Morale checks, much clearer now that shock has been removed. The time to take a morale check is clarified, and then the impact failing morale check is clearly defined as well. So again, very nice, very clear, very easily explained. And you get a nice picture here, nice bit of illustration.